I have 3 treatment rooms in my clinic, but only utilize 2. I want to use this third room because it's basically stagnant chi. I've tried to rent it out and I'm not finding the right fit or barely even finding a person with a pulse who wants to rent it. Now I'm ready to just figure out how to utilize the space on my own, but I have some blocks around what to do or how to do it. I've considered bringing on a TCM student assistant who can cup, moxa, and pull needles. My concerns with this are twofold. I'm not sure I want the extra payroll expense, and I like the time I get with patients during cupping because it's my time to chat about their life and make a deeper connection with them. I also have a block that is keeping me stuck at treating around 25 to 30 patients per week when my current schedule would allow for up to 40. I'm open to yours and anyone else's suggestions on the logistics of running 3 rooms. So 3 rooms, 2 rooms, 4 rooms, 8 rooms. We've got a few things to cover here. And one of them has to do with, so we've got the space, we've got the time. And this is a little bit, let's disentangle this because you have considering bringing on a TCM student assistant who can do some of these things so that you don't have to cup, you don't have to moxa, and that way you can have now time to take on that extra patient per hour, right? Because it's like a time issue. So the room's vacant because you don't have time to get to that third one. This is a lot like when you go to a restaurant and they say, there'll be just a short wait, 10-minute wait, and you look and there's all these empty tables, right? And you're like, well, just give me one of those. Well, it's not the table, it's the server, right? The server's capped out. So there's only so many people on staff, right? It's the same kind of thing. Like, oh, you've got this extra room, use it. Well, I can't because I'm out of time, right? Every single day. So this is an issue. And you have kind of 2 ways to go with this. One is you keep your timing how it is and you don't use the need for 2 rooms, which is okay. There's not a judgment there. It's okay. And this person also said that she started charging extra for cupping, hoping that would deter people from wanting it. So then she wouldn't be cupping, so she'd have extra time, right? But at the same time, there's conflict because it's like, oh, I like the time I get with patients during cupping because it's my time to chat about their life and make a deeper connection with them. Sure. So there's a few things here. They're getting all kind of tangled up, but essentially you got to decide if you don't want to condense and make your services more efficient, then you won't need to use that extra room anyway. So you need to do something else with it, right? And yeah, you could rent it out, but that seems to be challenging here. You could hire somebody, right? You could like a massage therapist or an esthetician or whatever, like you could either rent it to them or you could hire them and you could sell on their behalf and have them fulfill the services, right? You could hire another acupuncturist, you could do all kinds of things in there. Or you could put, some of the suggestions in our group have come in of putting in more passive things that don't require your attention or energy. So like devices, right? Like a special kind of massage chair, vibration plates, these kinds of things. Like you can have basically like a fun kind of playroom for people to go just use things, and they could pay for those a la carte. One of the things that I think is the best with that, if you're going to have things like a sauna or a vibration plate, like a biohacking room, basically neurofeedback, any of that kind of stuff, is to package it just like you would package acupuncture and just go, okay, it's 12 sauna sessions or 12 biofeedbacks or whatever it is. Like, don't a la carte all that stuff. Just make it part of a grander view. And when somebody has a treatment plan, you can include some of that in their treatment plan. It's like, okay, we're going to be hitting this from a few angles. You've got these sauna sessions, you got acupuncture, up to whatever many times within a certain date range. Like all that stuff will help make use of the room and bring in some more income from it, right? That's if you decide to do that. In terms of the space itself, I mean, you can do an exercise. Okay, so here's an exercise, right? You can actually figure out like how much money you're making per square foot of physical space. So this is really easy to do is you just take your square footage and you take your annual income, right? You take the dollars per square feet, you just divide it. And then you know how much money you make per square foot of office space. And it's really kind of fun because then you can do other things. Like you can say, okay, how much room does my retail area take up? And you might measure that. And your retail area is really just like 10 square feet because it's vertical. It's got shelves and all that. And you go, how much do I make from retail every year? And then you can realize the density of like that little piece of your office brings in so much money, right? It's a very income dense area in terms of per foot. You can also do the same thing with your treatment rooms. And you're going to have, there's the actual like income generating square footage, like your retail rack and your treatment room where your table is and your needles are and that kind of thing. But they don't exist in a vacuum. So you're going to have administrative support. There's something happening, right? So you've got a front desk, you've got a waiting room, you've got these other things that aren't like income generating, but are required for you to do business. So you're never going to be able to maximize it where like every square foot just makes a ton of money. It's not going to work that way. You're going to have this distribution where, some like the bathroom, how much money does that make? None, right? It actually costs money because you got to put toilet paper and shit like that in there. You got to have it cleaned, all these, it's totally an expense, but it's a required expense, part of the cost of doing business, right? So you're gonna have a hard time like optimizing your bathroom square footage income, but you can start to look and go, okay, what could I do with this square footage? So if you've got a sauna or something like that, how much did the sauna cost, right? But also like the footprint in your office and what's required to run a sauna versus how much that brings in, right? Would you be better off with something else there? Would you be better off just renting out the room? Like there's a lot of ways to look at it, but you can figure out the numbers of it very quickly just by doing a division problem, right? Like how much footprint is this thing? How much money does it bring in? You'll find that if you start to zoom out and look at your practice and go, okay, can I make anything leaner in terms of these areas that don't bring in any money? Like can I make it less expensive to do my own administration, right? That's also a good thing to do, but that's getting kind of beyond the square footage part, right? That's just looking at operations. But anyway, you can use bird's eye and go, okay, this is my office. So I've got this treatment room. How much money would it bring in if I was renting it out? Could I make more in that square footage by having some kind of passive therapies in there? It's an interesting question to ask, right? And then it's like, now I've got to sell those, meaning not that you've got to twist people's arms and get them in there, but you've got to sell those. You've got to be able to explain that. You've got to be able to explain how that ties in to somebody's goal for being in your care and how it doesn't compete with or replace what else you're doing, right? Because if you're like, oh, I've got this sauna, you don't even need acupuncture. You can just come to the sauna. And maybe you're right. Maybe you're not. Might be good if you can do that, right? But at the same time, if you're thinking bottom line and you're like, okay, acupuncture has other benefits that the sauna doesn't. People are already coming for acupuncture. I don't want to make them pick, right? I don't want to be competing with my own self in-house. So maybe understand how you got to frame that stuff and how you've got to weave it together, right? But of course, have integrity. Like if you can solve somebody's problem in an easier and simpler way, like do that and just help more people like that, right? But at the same time, you don't want to undermine what you're already doing, if that makes sense. So have integrity about it. But these are things to think about. There's some conflict here. Like, oh, I want to get rid of cupping so I have more time. But I like cupping because I like to take the time to talk to people. I'll just share my experience here. I found that I said, I don't do cupping. I don't do gua sha. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't do moxa. It's home care. I consider it all home care. If you want to do moxa, here's the moxa stick. Here's an instructional video on how to do it. My digital clone will teach you. You can have a family member do it. It's not a high value activity for me. Like being an acupuncturist, the highest value activity is putting the needles in, right? And even having an assistant come take them out would be great. That would be a higher value thing, to be able to do that, because then you can put more in on other people. So this line of thinking can be helpful of going, okay, what's my highest value activity? It can also be incredibly damaging if you take it too far. If you're like, I'm only going to focus on my highest value things, you will go crazy. Right? So you got to give yourself some room and some grace. So maybe you do want to still do cupping. Maybe you still want to do a little body work or a little gua sha or whatever. I've spoken in the past about cupping and things like that. And I find that, there's a massage therapist in town who does cupping. Great. I'll send the people there. And now I've got a referral relationship that goes back and forth. I'm creating a community, and I'm not doing cups because that's not my high value skill. For me, I found doing acupuncture, if you can get your acupuncture clinical clarity dialed in, then it doesn't take you fucking forever to think about all your points and like, oh, what am I going to do today? You're just bopping in needles. I found that I could shoot the breeze with people during that. Usually took me about 5 minutes to put needles in, and during that time we're kind of catching up and chatting. I'm getting to know them and that kind of thing. And that was enough. It's a dense interaction. A lot happens in a short amount of time, but I'm not doing a style of acupuncture that requires me to be in there or doing all these things, right? I'm doing something else that I think works just as well with less kind of energetic output. And that met my needs for efficiency, but also for connection, because I kept the acupuncture pretty casual. Like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing that. What's going on with your husband anyway? Or, are your kids still in town visiting? Like, you can have a nice conversation while you're doing all that stuff. I found even like hardcore motor points, somebody's in the middle of answering you and then their whole like shoulder starts twitching and they're like, oh my God, and then as soon as that calms down, you're right back into your conversation, because dentists do it. They'll ask you a whole thing, stick their thumbs in your mouth and go, oh yeah, how was your trip? And you're like, burr, 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 burr. And they're like, oh, okay. It's like, if dentists can do it, we can do it, guys. That's kind of how I see it. It's like, we can have conversations. So you can still connect with people without cupping. We need to disentangle those things. Make it a choice, make it an option. One of the things that this can be really helpful. If you're trying to become more efficient and see more patients per hour, then there are different parameters you can play with. One of them is to have shorter appointments. There's nowhere is it carved in stone that every acupuncture appointment has to be 1 hour long. Nowhere. You can be doing 45 minutes, door to door, like in and out. Sometimes you can just do motor points. I mean, think about, you go to see your family and it's a holiday. It's like Thanksgiving or something. Or if you're not in the US, it's like whatever holiday where you kind of go see your family, and there's, your uncle or whatever, your cousin, and they got a shoulder thing, and you're like, oh, come here. And they're just sitting on a chair at the kitchen table, and you move their collar, bing, 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 couple twitches, and they're like, holy shit, that feels better. Thank you. How long did that take? Do they need to take a nap? All these things, right? Or do they just want to feel better? Your patients are like that too. You can just be bop, 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 doing motor points. You can have somebody in and out of your office in 10 minutes. You don't have to justify your fee based on how long it took. You're doing a job. You're solving a problem, right? So think about those things too. There are creative ways to shorten appointments without anybody missing out on anything whatsoever. It depends on the person, what they want, what their problem is, what the method is you're using, how does that fit into the plan, right? Now, here's another way. If you want to get efficient, you want to start to see more patients per hour. One of the things to do is to imagine how you're going to structure that. And even if you don't have the extra room yet, if you're thinking about growing into a different office space, doesn't matter. You can still do this. And I've done this, which is why I'm telling you this really worked for me, was you start to structure, how would this time look? How would you schedule it? And then you go to work with your normal thing, but you schedule it that way as if you're seeing the extra person. But the extra person doesn't actually come in. You don't schedule a person during that slot. You just pretend somebody would be coming in then. And what I was doing at the time was I would just stand there and do Qigong, right? So here's how it would look. If I was trying to move from, like, let's say I was seeing, I'm going to make this really easy. Let's say I was seeing one person an hour, right? One patient per hour. And I was thinking, boy, I'd sure like to see a second patient per hour. What I'm going to do is plan that out. Okay, how would that look? Well, most people would go to the half hours. I'll see you at 2. I'll see the second one at 2:30. Don't do that. It doesn't take you half an hour to put in needles. Go from 2, schedule the other person at 2:15. Or if you want, schedule them both at 2, and then whoever gets that first, you take them, and then the other person has to wait like 10 minutes and they get in, right? Something like that, where you've got them coming in tight, because when they come in tight, they leave tight as well, which means you're not waiting at your clinic an extra half an hour for that last person to be on the table still. You don't have that lag, right? And I've done this in other videos. But essentially, if I was trying to move from one patient an hour to 2 patients an hour, or 2 to 3, or whatever it is, I'd say, okay, I'm going to have my one patient that I know they're coming. It's Jill or Barbara or Sam or whoever. They're actually coming in. I know that they're coming in at 2. I'm going to pretend I've got another patient coming in at 2:15, and I want to experience that workflow. What would that be like? How long would it take? So I know that person who comes in at 2 to 2:15, I'm putting in needles. They're on the table. I come out of the room, and then I imagine I've got another person coming in. It's going to take 15 minutes where I'd be occupied with that person. Obviously, I haven't scheduled that person because I'm still working it out, but instead I stand there for 15 minutes like this, breathing with my energy ball, doing Qigong stuff, set a little timer. And when that 15 minutes is up, I know that's when I would have come out of the treatment room, most likely. Okay, how's the rest of this flow going? Am I going in to check on this person who came in at 2? What's needed of me? When am I pulling needles? When would I be pulling needles for the next person? And essentially, you just fill in every gap where there would have been a person with more standing there doing Qigong. And then you know if you can realistically fit that person in. And then you can start to change your scheduling and go, okay, I'm going to start scheduling there goes your Qigong time, right? Because you're going to fit a patient in during that. But you know that you've got that window dialed in to where you could practically have your attention focused on different things at different times. So until you've got real people coming in, you just do the energy ball or whatever you're going to do. I don't know, read a book or something. I like the Qigong. It was a good time. It's a really good time to be doing that. So there's how you can start to grow into a different rhythm, is to just insert Qigong where that extra patient would be. And then if you drop the ball because you have to be somewhere, then you didn't architect the timing just right. So there's that. Essentially, something else to consider here too is like what you need space for. So just because something's a treatment room doesn't mean it has to be patient facing, right? If you need that for storage, then you can use it for storage. Storage isn't really a high value. Something else you might consider though is like if you're starting to go online, maybe you turn that treatment room into a recording studio. And now you know where all your shit is, where, you know, at the end of the day, when you're done with patients, you go in there, record your videos, things you got to do, get that out there. Maybe you're doing, making content for social media or whatever. Like you've got a place set up. If you don't need that, if you have that somewhere else, or you're going to do like walk and talks, that's something to consider, right? But I know for me, like I had an office, I had a clinic, and then I had a secret office as well that no patients knew about. You know, they wouldn't find me there. It was, you know, it was a separate office space, but I didn't want to sign, you know, I signed the lease with the lady, and she's like, we can put you a sign. I'm like, I don't want any sign. I don't want anybody fucking finding me here. This is like my secret place to go record stuff. And that's, you can see that I got a ton of videos from there. It was a really nice office. All it was for doing these things. So sometimes you need a dedicated space, right? I couldn't fit that into my clinic at the time. You know, my clinic was just, it was all treatment rooms and very dense in that way. So I needed a separate place to do this, mainly because I had little monster children who, they're still little monsters, but now they leave me alone more now. But I mean, they would be in here just climbing on me and yelling and everything else. And you know, I'm all for having a natural experience, but I also respect your nervous system, and I don't think you want to hear all that savagery when you're trying to learn stuff. So you may consider taking that treatment room and making it into a recording studio or something else, right? Think creatively in terms of what you need, and then if you were to do the math on the floor plan and go, okay, well, how much revenue is this generating now? And it's like, holy shit, dude, you get a recording studio, you got Fractal Systems, like these videos are valuable that you're making. So there's another thing to consider. So a lot of it's going to be getting out of your own head in terms of clarity of what you actually want. There's two things to consider here. There's internal resistance and external resistance. If you're internally clear, like I want to put somebody in here, I want to rent this space, and the external world is just telling you, no, 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 no. Maybe you got to listen to that, right? But you can have internal resistance too, where you're like, I want to see an extra patient per hour, right? But I don't, but I do, but I don't. How should I use this room? Well, you got to figure out your internal resistance. It's very hard to break external resistance and just like demand the world provide you somebody to sublet a room, right? But it's a lot easier and more realistic to start to just push through and disentangle internal resistance. Like, all right, what is my deal here? Like, what kind of stories am I telling myself? Why am I stuck at 25, 30 patients a week when I could easily take 40? What does that mean, right? I'll give you some thoughts. Here's something I've seen a fair amount. Doesn't always apply. I'm probably going to get in trouble because I'm going to talk about genders here and gender roles. It doesn't always work along the lines of gender roles, but I have seen this. It's just something that tends to happen more often. A lot of times you'll get a female who's in the acupuncture healing profession, and she's married to a husband, and the husband has a more steady, stable job. This isn't everybody, obviously, right? But what can happen is the husband's providing the predictable income, and oftentimes working for somebody, maybe it's corporate, something like that. It's a very just fucking like, there's security there, at least the appearance of security. I mean, anybody can be fired at any time, but like you're on a payroll, you know, you've got a job. And then the wife will have this practice, right? It's more entrepreneurial, like a healing arts thing. It's a little more like kind of just off the beaten path, but the income is volatile or not at all, or it's actually negative. And the husband's corporate job is paying for the overhead of this like struggling, failing clinic, right? This happens. This isn't just with women and men. It doesn't always only work that way. And sure as hell know that men can have clinics that take a dive as well. Like I had a clinic that tanked and it fucking sucked, and I'm a guy, right? So I know it's not a one-to-one with the gender thing, but this does happen a lot. And why it can happen from there is that the female can almost be subconsciously capped because she doesn't want to out-earn the male. It happens, right? Not always, but it can happen where the guy, his ego is like, I'm the provider, I'm the breadwinner, lean on me, right? I'm stable, I gotcha. And the female's like doing her business and whatever. But at some point, you know, the business is generating cash, and then it's generating fucking real cash. And then it's like, there's this kind of unspoken thing that happens where it's like part of the male's value in the relationship was that he was the breadwinner, but now she is. Does that mean the male is weak? Does that mean the male is now not desirable? Does that mean the male doesn't have purpose or significance or status, right? No. But the subconscious may be chewing on that a lot. So that's something to consider. It's like especially for women, the danger of out earning your spouse, right, can start to trigger some ego resistance. And you may want to have those conversations. I mean, I do that like with my wife. I tell her that. I say, listen, if you ever want to out earn me, fucking go for it, dude. Like, you can retire me. I'm good. I got to be good on that, because I don't want to have any ever subconscious thing capping her growth, especially when it comes to something, financial or something that might fulfill her. At this point, she's got her hands more than full with homeschooling the kids and all that. But, I'm planting seeds for the future. Like, she's very entrepreneurial. She's very smart. She knows what she's doing. And if she wants to run a business, I don't ever want her worried that she's going to out earn me, right? Because it's not a competition. It's an expanding pie. But not everybody has that baked into their relationship. This might be a conversation you want to have. This may not be the only reason why you're blocking yourself. This may not have anything to do with anything, but I'm definitely going to talk about this topic because I've seen it come up a bunch. I've seen it come up for Doctors Club. I've seen female practitioners who tell me things on their applications, right? Like, oh, I'd really want to get into fractal systems and actually like be making real money with my practice. I'd like to retire my husband from his job. And then there's all this conflict and all this drama. And these are people who they'll self-sabotage their way out. They never do the program anyway. Like, that, there's issues, right? But I can't help but wonder if some of that issue is that the intentions are misaligned. Like, the husband doesn't want to be retired. The husband wants to provide as well, right? So this is a success problem ultimately. And I know that not everybody is like a husband and a wife. Like, sometimes there's, two wives, or some people live in a polyamorous huddle or whatever it is, where you get a group of people together and there's like 3 husbands and 10 wives. I don't know how shit works. People do all their own thing. But what I have seen is there can be the old school balance of the male wants to provide and the female wants to be provided for at a subconscious level. And anything that threatens to upset that mythology, right, it can just cause subconscious blocks. So if you want to outgrow that subconscious mythology, you got to make it conscious. You got to have those kinds of conversations. You do. So there you go. All right, get to work.